This is Jim Horn with our continuing black and white photography master series. Born and raised in Tulsa, Oklahoma, Gerald Jerry Shonkwiler became an architect after studying at Oklahoma State University and the University of Arizona and serving in various National Guards. Jerry relocated to San Diego in 1973 to practice architecture, retiring in 2007 to focus on his long standing passion for photography. With over 50 years of experience, Jerry's architectural background played a crucial role in his photographic approach, where he focused on capturing the intricate details and beauty of different locations. Adhering to Leonardo da Vinci's principle to know how to see, Jerry's photographs aim to present unique perspectives to viewers. His work has been recognized through awards, exhibitions, and features in national and international publications, and even exhibiting in New York City in 2015. Married for 29 years, Jerry and his wife have traveled to over 75 countries across all 7 continents, offering ample opportunities for Jerry to capture and share his photographic moments. How are you, sir?
I'm great, and thank you for inviting me to discuss photography with you today, Jim. It's my pleasure.
You might move your mic just a little bit away from your face. There you go, because we're getting a little bit of breath action there. Real good. That's good, Jerry. So,
Thank you.
Jerry, you've been at this for 50 years. That's commendable. That's a long time. Um, and when I looked at your photographs in the latest edition of Black and White Photography, I was really impressed. So what I've done is I've asked Jerry to send me about 5 of his images in our master series, and thought we would talk about his images. These are not a This is not a critique. This is looking at someone's images and admiring them for what they are and what he's done, and we're going to find out how he captured them. But for all the equipment nerds out there, Jerry, we have to tell them what kind of equipment you're using.
Certainly. I've been shooting, started out with Nikon, well, even back further in those 50 years, it started out with a Petri Pinta that I bought at a at a pawn shop. I paid $35 for a 35 millimeter camera. Then, when my brother was in Vietnam, he had the opportunity to get some equipment for me, and he bought me a Miranda Sensor X. And then after that, I graduated to Nikon, started out with the F300, I think it was. And then after I finally retired in 2007, I switched from analog to digital. And with that, I got the D700, 750. And most of my shots are in the last 15 years have been taken with that 750 using either a combination of Nikon lenses, zoom lenses, or macro. Most of the time when I travel, I don't like to carry a lot of equipment, so I usually have an 18 to 200 Nikon zoom. And then I also have a Nikon 18 to 24 wide angle that I often use with special locations like interiors.
Super. So now we've got that camera, the equipment thing out of the way. We're going to move on to some great images. Okay, Jerry. One thing when I looked at your images, I mean, what I saw all the tonal qualities that would make Ansel Adams put a smile on the old guy's face.
I'm
And
honored.
yeah, and so tell us a little bit about this photograph.
Certainly, this is one of the three that we'll be reviewing. That was part of the portfolio submittal for Black and White magazine. My wife is from Minot, North Dakota, and so when we would travel up to Dakota, they had a family cabin, a very small little cabin up on the Lake Metagoshi up on the border. So what we like to do is to travel up to that lake. I would take a lot of the side roads and back roads of North Dakota, and I was just able to see and capture some very unique scenes of what had happened in North Dakota. And obviously, a lot of the family farms had disappeared. And it made for some very unique subjects, somewhat tragically, you might say, just to see what had happened with some of the homesteads. And this was one of the sites along the way that we would stop and pull off, and just happened to have great clouds. It's a typical Midwestern sky where you have constantly changing clouds. And so there was this decrepit house that was off to the left, and it was balanced by the trees that had lost their foliage. This was in the fall, and so all the leaves had fallen off. And just with the composition of the clouds and the old home and the scale, the composition, I just felt it was a very strong photograph. And I think you're right. There were a lot of different tones and shades and blacks and grays in it that I thought were
What you talked about initially, trying to capture the degradation of the of some of these buildings, and I think we'll see that in the next photo. I think you captured it. I mean, I feel
thank
it when I looked at this photo. I feel that here's maybe an old farm scene as you talked about, but here's a farm scene that it's not quite like the modern farms you might see here in the Midwest where I'm at right now. It's run down, it's dilapidated. I think the trees add a lot to it. I mean, it adds a little bit of a spooky feeling. Is that the right word?
Well, I think so, and I think the fact that all of the leaves are gone on the trees seem to imply that maybe the trees are dead. That would maybe
Yeah,
match the appearance of the
exactly.
farm that's deed. So I
Yeah.
think you're very right. That's a good observation.
Let's take a look at the next shot. Now here's another one with the same type of. Um, I guess this is the same venue, Jerry.
Yes, it is. Different time, I think, but one of the back roads. And this was particularly intriguing to me because this appears to be an old railroad passenger car that was setting out there in the field. And I often wonder what the story is behind that. You know, how they got the old railroad car out there, and secondly, was it used as some sort of haven if a storm came up in the North Dakota plains in the farm there? Probably the nearest farm was, I don't know, maybe a mile, 2 miles away. But there was this one individual tree that was there, and you wonder. I thank them. I appreciated them putting that railroad car next to that tree. That made a wonderful composition. And once again, just getting some nice cloud forms, and often wonder. I would love to hear the story behind that and how its placement occurred and the acquisition.
The very small thing. I love the way you've been able to bring out the detail in the tree against the dark sky. Um, you know, you can once again you feel the tree. It's just one of those lonely, desolate photographs. And by the way, Jerry, I did not realize that was a rail car. Just looking at it. And you're right. I think a lot of the photographers sometimes see something like this and they just pass it up. And I think because you've been doing this so long, it seems to me that you realize you can't pass these kinds of shots up, can you?
No, it's very impossible. And I often wondered, and even after I took this, I went closer to the car, and I was hoping to see if it might be one of the typical old ornate Pullman cars that was on the railroad. But the interior was pretty much vacant. You know, it did not have any of the seats or any of the other accoutrements that would define it what it was. But it was. I like the curvature of the roof. It almost gave it kind of an early streamline look to that train car, and it kind of softened the frame between the sky and the car also. But it was just fascinating to see it out there.
Great shot.
Thank you.
Ah, this is now. I know we've got five here, and but this is one of my favorites. I mean, look at, and some of you are on a podcast, and some of you are looking at this on a YouTube video. But the building is leaning into the clouds, and it's all sort of symmetrical going in from left to right. What talk about this shot, Jerry?
Well, thank you. When I saw that, as you know, they're living in the Midwest, the clouds move through very, very quickly. And so we parked the car and I went running up to that area because the clouds were moving from left to right across the sky. And I just hoped that I could get there soon enough that the clouds had not disappeared from that particular composition. And I was able to get that line of clouds just over the top of the building and just being at the right time, or sometimes making the right time happen. But also, I'm particularly intrigued by these old barns and houses. As an architect, there's a phrase in wooden construction. It's called long-term creep, and you can just see how the wood is due to the winds that are pushing the building, and the long-term creep is occurring in the structure of the building, and you just kind of wonder how long will it be before I go back to that same location and I see a pile of wooden rubble on the ground as what was once, a farm.
That's exactly right. You opportunities like this come probably once in a lifetime, and you don't want to miss them. And I can see a photographer like yourself running to the scene and stopping the car. And your wife, I'm sure, is familiar with that kind of behavior by now, right?
Yes, she is. She's a very patient person. I appreciate that.
Yeah, they have to be. Let's take a look at the next shot. Now, not necessarily in the same genre, but still is stunning. And I get back to my Ansel Adams comment before. And I mean, folks, I mean, he could have blown out the whites. You can see, I mean, detail and just around the whole gray spectrum. Where was this at, Jerry?
Well, first of all, it's not in North Dakota, that's for sure.
You're
Second,
right.
some people might argue otherwise that are from that area, but we had the very, very good fortune to go to Antarctica in December of 2021. We had been planning to go there, but then with COVID, it got put off. And luckily, because we have the ability to travel, we received a notice from a travel company that said Argentina is opening up. If you're able to go to Antarctica, we can save you a lot of money. So we took advantage of that. Uh, it was a very interesting passage from Ushuaia, Argentina, at the tip across the Drake Passage. Uh, they called it the Purple Monster, and we had seas that were 50 feet plus high and winds that are more than 60 miles an hour for 2 days as we rocked back and forth. And fortunately, neither my wife nor I became seasick, and I attributed the fact that it might have been my family lineage is also Irish, and I attribute the fact that maybe it was my Irish fisherman's genes, or my wife is Norwegian and it was her Viking genes that
Yeah, there
spared
you
us the
go.
sea. But after we reached the Antarctic area, it was a small boat that held about 160 passengers. They would divide the group into two. One group they would take them and land on Antarctica, and the other group would travel around the boat and the part of Antarctica in the rubber. Oh, I forget the name of the rubber motorized rafts that hold about 6 or 8 zodiacs that are in the zodiacs. And we would just motor around looking for seals, birds, or even whales. And in this particular case, we happened to motor by this huge iceberg that was just floating there. And this one, I might mention, was just taken with an iPhone that I had because it was
God
passing
bless
so
the
quickly.
iPhone.
Yes, it's
Yeah,
amazing, and I just didn't have the time to get my camera out of its bag that I was protecting from the elements, and so I was
right.
able to snap off a few shots with the iPhone, and with the clouds and the colors and the textures, and I'm honored that you compare it to Ansel Adams. I mean,
Well, I
with the
do
drones there.
because, and I'm not being facetious or hyperbolic. I mean, you've got those of you that are. I mean, you look into the iceberg on the right hand side where the grays are, the tones. You can see everything in there, and then you get to the white part of the iceberg, and it's perfectly exposed. You can see the ripples in. I mean, it's with, this is why the camera companies are probably, the small pocket cameras have almost gone by the wayside. I mean, if you can get shots like this is phenomenal. So,
Well, thank you. I just as a side note, since I've recently sent this photo has been selected for exhibition in two other uh, galleries. So I guess fortunately they too recognized the quality of the photograph, and I was honored that this photo has been selected for two other exhibitions.
oh, certainly has. I can understand. Now, the next photo is going to show your architectural eye. There we go. I thought about that when I saw it. I saw
Thank you.
Jerry's bio before his. Obviously, he sent it to me, and I looked at this. I said, "This is an architect, right? I mean, he sees the form. I mean, it's just." Explain this to us, Jerry. Where was this at? Where did you see it? So forth.
Certainly. I was driving from San Diego back to Tucson, Arizona, where the University of Arizona is, to see some friends. And right before you get to the Arizona California border crossing the Colorado River, there is a little pull off to this. They call it a town. I don't even know if it's a town. It's called Felicity, California. And as I was driving by, I happened to see this little chapel, oh, maybe about a half, three quarters of a mile or so up on the hillside up there. And I thought, wow, I've got to go up and see that. And so I took the exit, drove off, and I parked. And it's a place, it's called the Center of the World, and it was created by this Frenchman that created this center. It's one of the most unique places, and there was nobody else there. They have a little gift store, and you go in, and there was a woman. You pay $5 to see it, and she says, "Oh, for another $5, do you want to get a certificate where you visited the center of the world?" And well, of course, that's worth 5. Well, then we went out, and they have this pyramid where you can stand inside this pyramid, and they show where the center of the world is. But obviously, my concern was I wanted to get up to the chapel, and I said, "Can I go up and see the chapel?" And she says, "Oh, yes, yes, you're free to go up there." But so I walked up there, and the starkness of that little chapel just sitting up on the hill and the
Wow.
stairway, obviously, the illusion is the name of this is Stairway to Heaven. How can I not
Good
how can I
title.
not use that title? It just screams at you. But I had to wait for about half hour or so until the light shifted around, so it created that unique pattern along the stairway. Now I've never been there, but I understand I think it's in Chichen Itza or something. There's one of the pyramids there that a certain time of the year the shadow hits the balustrade or the side that goes up the steps, and it creates the shadow of a serpent or a snake for twice times a year. And so I happened to see the handrail creating that, and it reminded me a little bit of that shadow up in Chichen Itza that I hope to see someday. But anyway, I just sat there and waited for the shadow to occur. I took several photos of it to compare where the shadow was, and I settled on this one. And this is a very unique place. There are about 10 or 12 granite, almost like obelisks that are laying down on the ground. And this person has had carved into it literally the history of the universe, everything from the creation through the dinosaurs up through the revolution. It's an unbelievable place, but it was so strange that I'm thinking around, here I am the only person there. Is this one of those places where they say, well, we have no idea where Mr. Shonkwiler disappeared? He was last seen driving to Tucson, Arizona. and
uh,
whether or not I was going to be, abducted and you'd never hear from me again. But anyway, after touring the site and taking the pictures, I got my certificate that proves that I was at the center of the world, and I crossed the river on into Tucson, onto Arizona, and went into Tucson. So
super story and a phenomenal photograph. Uh,
thank you.
uh, One of the things final question I have, um, because people that listen to the or YouTube and the podcast, they're always interested. Besides equipment, um, what kind of do you do? A lot of post processing, or do you do minimal, or what's your post processing workflow like?
Well, first of all, I download my photos into Adobe Bridge. And I keep all of my photos on a separate hard drive and a backup hard drive, just because I don't want to load up my computer. My computer doesn't have that much memory. I've probably have 3 or 4 multiple terabyte hard drives with backups on my photos. Then after I download them, I will go through and I will name them, do the batch rename on them, just so I can remember where it was and the date and that sort of thing. And then after I do that, I usually put them in another file of ones that I would like to process. And then I process them in Adobe Photoshop. And the most recent edition is the Creative CC, Adobe CC, whatever that is. And the amount of processing depends upon actually the photo. I try to take out as many distractions from the photo as possible. I try to get as much of the exposure correct in the camera, so that I don't have to do a lot of processing. Of course, my wife thinks I spend too much time processing photos, but that's a joy that I love. And then I just kind of do what's necessary. And I would say that one thing that I probably spend a little too much time on is I try to eliminate a lot of maybe visual distractions in the photo if there are some. And that's
Sure.
kind of under the theory, it goes back to the architectural, that less is more. And so I want the subject of the photo to be really the central object that people are viewing. And I try to eliminate little things out of, maybe a rock off to the side or a tree limb sticking into the picture that I couldn't get out of the way. And then after that, I will just save it to different formats, either a JPEG or usually a TIFF to do that. And then also file that. If it's a particularly good film, then I'll file it in my best of photos you might have and move on to the next one. Then.
Super, super. Well, Jerry, I really appreciate having you on the show. I think the viewers have gotten to see some phenomenal photographs. I appreciate you answering my email. It's hard to get people on to talk about their work sometimes, and I understand that. But I certainly appreciate people like yourselves and really being a master of photography coming on and talking about your work. It's very important because I think people get inspired by other people's work, and that's the idea behind this program. Anyway, Jerry, I thank you very much, sir, and I look forward to maybe we'll have another YouTube video next year as you begin to compile more photographs.
Well, thank you. I'm honored that you asked me to be on your blog and share my ideas with photography. It's a real fun passion for me, and I enjoy it. Thank you very much, Jim.
I can tell.